Welcome to calm, dreamy sleep, a peaceful place where stories become dreams. Just relax and slowly close your eyes. Take a gentle breath in and let the day quietly drift away. If this story brings you peace, if you feel calmer, lighter, please subscribe and like. So let's start. There is a path that only appears to those who are willing to walk it. It is not marked on any map. It does not lead to any city or village. It winds through fields and forests, over hills and across streams. And it asks nothing of those who follow it, except their attention. On this path, many years ago, walked a man named Thomas. He was not young, and he was not old. He was somewhere in between, that quiet season of life when a person knows who they are, even if the rest of the world has not yet figured it out. Thomas had been walking for a very long time, not because he was lost, not because he was running from anything, simply because walking was what he was meant to do. Soft, curious, like footsteps on an empty road. The countryside stretched before him in waves of green. Rolling hills, dotted here and there with sheep or the occasional fat pony. The sky was wide and blue, with clouds that moved so slowly they seemed to be sleeping. Thomas walked alone, and he liked it that way. He had not always been a wanderer. Once he had been a working man, 8 hours a day, sometimes more, building the life that society expected. He had made money. He had strived. He had done everything he was supposed to do. But underneath it all, even then, he had heard the call, the whisper of wind through the trees, the babble of a brook, the way the green hills turned to gold in the evening light. These things spoke to him in a language more precious than any coin. The people he met along the road were not always kind. They would shoo him away from their doors as soon as they saw him. They would shake their heads and tell him they had nothing to spare. A crust of bread if he was lucky. An old pair of boots if the moon was in the right phase. Thomas did not blame them. He looked down at himself, his clothes travel-worn, his boots cracked and flapping, and he understood he was not a tidy sight. But he was polite. He was gentle. He never asked for more than anyone could give. And when they turned him away, he simply thanked them and continued on his way. One day, as the summer sun climbed toward its peak, Thomas heard the sound of rushing water. He followed it through a hedgerow between two small hills and found a little river, clear and cool, bubbling over stones, shaded by a weeping willow whose branches trailed the surface like long green fingers. Thomas decided this must be a sign. He would wash himself in the river. He would scrub his clothes as best he could. And then he would knock on the door of the farmhouse he could see in the distance and see if they had anything to spare. So he did. He waded into the cool water, and the little fish darted around his toes, curious about this strange creature that had joined their world. The birds sang in the branches above. The sun warmed his shoulders. Warm and gentle. When he was clean, he laid himself and his clothes on a sunny patch of bank to dry. The warmth of the sun made quick work of the soggy fabric, and soon he was dressed again, brushing his hair from his face, standing up straight, and making his way toward the farmhouse. He knocked on the heavy oak door. From inside came the patter of little feet. The door opened, and a small girl, no more than 6 or 7, looked up at him with wide eyes. She studied him for a long moment. Then, remembering her manners, she asked how she could help him. Thomas asked if her mother or father was home. The girl nodded and darted away without another word. A soft, expectant, like a door opening. A man came to the door, the girl's father, with his daughter skipping along behind him. Thomas greeted him politely. He told him he was a traveler and asked if the man might have anything to spare. The father shook his head gruffly. "We have nothing to give you," he said, not unkindly, but firmly. "Perhaps you should consider getting a job." Thomas had heard this line many times. He wanted to explain. He wanted to tell the man about the life he had left behind, the wages, the work, the hollow feeling that had followed him everywhere. He wanted to say that the whisper of the wind through the trees was more precious than any money he had ever received. But he did none of these things. He merely thanked the man and turned away. He walked. He noticed a strange breeze down by his toes. He looked down. Both of his boots had come detached from their soles. They flapped like open mouths as he walked, letting in dust and dirt with every step. Thomas sighed. He walked on. But after a while, his feet were simply too sore to continue. At midday, he spotted a twisted hawthorn tree growing on a small hill beside the road. Its branches spread wide, offering shade. The ground beneath it was soft with velvety moss. It looked like the perfect place for a nap. Like dreaming, like drifting. Thomas clambered up the slope. He sat down with his back against the trunk, looking out at the valley below. He took off his broken boots and let his sore feet rest in the breeze. It was not long before he started to drift off. He found himself in that magical place between dreaming and waking, part of him still feeling the moss and the sun and the wind, while another part of him was somewhere else entirely. Strange music drifted through his head. He was surrounded by hundreds of people, and there was something strange about them. They seemed to glow. They were at a celebration, a birthday party perhaps. Thomas felt he was just about to turn around and meet someone very important when a sharp pain in his foot brought him back to the waking world. Warm and wondering, he looked around. His gaze fell on his bare feet. All 3 of them. Wait, that could not be right. He looked again. There were his own 2 feet, and between them, a little creature the same size as his foot. A tiny person dressed in fine green clothes that seemed to be woven from leaves. On its little feet were 2 bright golden boots, made, it seemed, from marigold petals. Thomas gaped. Then a little piping voice came from the creature. "You must be off as soon as possible," it said. Thomas blinked. "I just need to rest a little longer," he said. "My feet are sore. I have been traveling for a long time." But the fairy was insistent. "Tonight is the Queen's birthday party," it said. "And you are sleeping in the exact spot where we have planned to have it. For 1,000 years, the Queen of the Fairies has had her party on this little hill under this hawthorn tree." Thomas listened in amazement. When the fairy finished, he bowed his head and apologized. "I will be on my way," he said, and he reached for his broken boots. The fairy watched him for a moment. Then it held up a tiny hand. It snapped its fingers. The boots jumped from Thomas's hands and ran off down the hill, with no feet in them, before he could react. Then the fairy sat down and took off its own shoes. The bright golden boots, finer than any Thomas had ever seen. "Take them," the fairy said, offering the boots. Thomas politely declined. "They are far too fine for me," he said. And besides, they were so small they could only fit on his fingers. But the fairy insisted, and Thomas felt he had no choice but to accept. He pulled one boot over one toe, then all the toes, then his entire foot. The boot magically grew and morphed to fit him perfectly. The other did the same. They were so comfortable, it felt like he was wearing nothing at all. His feet were no longer sore. He could walk forever. Thomas jumped to his feet with joy, thanking the fairy profusely. But as he turned to leave, the fairy stopped him. "The golden boots will never wear out," the fairy said. "They will never get dirty. They will be the only boots you need for the rest of your walking days." Thomas's heart soared. "However," the fairy continued, "if you ever tell anyone where you got them, they will disappear forever." Thomas promised. He swore on his life he would never tell a soul. The fairy examined him with its dark, knowing eyes. Then it smiled, a wide, warm smile. "Delay your travels for one night," it said. "The Queen of the Fairies would like to have you as a guest of honor at her birthday celebration." Soft, surprised, like recognition. Thomas was surprised. "How do you know the Queen wants to invite me?" he asked. The fairy's smile grew wider. "I am the Queen," she said. Thomas was so surprised he stumbled into a shaky bow. The Queen laughed and waved away his formality. And then, from nowhere, a strange, beautiful song seemed to rise up from the very earth. Fairies appeared from behind every rock, from every blade of grass, from every leaf on the hawthorn tree. Thomas was swept away. All day and late into the evening, there was dancing and singing, storytelling and eating and revelry. The night was a blur of joyful merriment. He ate the best food he had ever tasted. He listened to the sweetest music ever heard. He could not remember falling asleep, And in the morning, when he woke under the hawthorn tree, only flashes of memory remained. But looking down at his feet, he saw the golden boots, as real as the ground beneath him. Thomas stood up, stretching in the fresh morning air. He felt better than he had in months, maybe even years. He wiggled his toes in his golden fairy boots, enjoying the comfort. Then he set off down the little grassy hill, back toward the road. When he reached it, he looked back at the hawthorn tree and the mossy spot where he had spent the night. A thought briefly stole over him. How much of what he remembered was true? Did he really meet the Fairy Queen? Did he really celebrate her birthday with her? If not, where did the shoes come from? Thomas decided that such questions were better left unanswered, and he made his way down the road. Like a Sbidney days and nights, Thomas traveled in a state of joy he had not known since he first set out on his walking trip. He found he could walk for miles without needing a rest. True to the Fairy Queen's words, the boots never got dirty, never broke, never shrank, and never made his feet hurt. One day he stepped into a big puddle. His feet stayed dry. He quickly came to consider these shoes his most prized possession. He and his golden boots walked across fields and through forests. With his newfound enthusiasm and comfort, he journeyed to places further away than he had ever dared. He crossed purple moors blanketed with heather, marveling at the way the wind shook the heather across the landscape like waves on the sea. He hiked up mountains to sit under strange rock formations, each one carved by the elements over thousands of years. He camped on white sand beaches on remote islands where it was so windy that no trees could grow. He walked to the oldest forest he could find and went to the heart of the woods, where he camped under the branches of the largest, oldest tree. In the moments of rest, when he sat down after a long day of walking, he amused himself by paying attention to all the wonderful details of the world around him. Soft, contemplative, like a lesson learned. But in all his walking, Thomas found himself skirting around villages and avoiding big cities. He was worried that he might somehow let it slip, that he had gotten his magical, marvelous boots from the Fairy Queen, and thus lose them forever. As a result, he had to learn new skills. He foraged for berries and wild mushrooms in the forests. He became adept at identifying plants for making his meals. This new knowledge drew him closer to nature. It made him more aware of the changing of the seasons. And it was nearly a year before he found himself back in the land of the rolling green hills. His sun was bright. Midsummer was fast approaching. Under the heat of the day, Thomas decided to take a break and go for a swim in the river where he had bathed a year ago. The water was cool and refreshing, but Thomas always stayed where he could keep one eye on his bundle of clothes and the golden boots hidden beneath them. After his swim, he returned to the bank and dressed. He was just lacing up his boots when someone approached. Like an interruption, like fate. A tall man strode purposefully toward Thomas. He looked wealthy. Fine shoes, fine clothes, everything in immaculate condition. Behind him, an elegant horse waited patiently by the road. Thomas assumed this man had never walked further than his front door to the stables in his life. "What are you doing?" the man asked, his voice authoritative. Thomas answered politely. He was having a swim, he said, but now he was finished, and he would be on his way. The rich man looked down his nose at Thomas. Then his gaze fell on the golden boots. "Where did you get such fine boots?" the man demanded. Thomas did not want to lie, but he also wanted to keep his promise. "They were a gift," he mumbled. The rich man did not believe him. He accused Thomas of stealing. He even threatened to take him to the authorities. This insult was not one that Thomas could bear. Before he could stop himself, he spoke. "The boots were a gift," he said, his voice proud. "From the Fairy Queen." In an instant, the boots were gone. Thomas felt the cool grass beneath his feet, and nothing else. The man stared down at Thomas's bare feet, unable to believe his eyes. The two men looked at one another in silence for a long moment. Finally, the rich man spoke. "I apologize," he said. "I have to accept what I have just seen. The fairy boots disappeared, so your story must be true." He regretted that he had falsely accused Thomas and made him lose his boots. Then the rich man did something even more unexpected. He offered Thomas a ride on his horse. Thomas accepted, not sure what else to do. The rich man led the horse with Thomas on it all the way back to his large, fine house. On the journey they talked. The rich man spoke of his farm and his family. Thomas spoke of the beautiful things he had experienced on his walks, the way the sun painted the landscape in shades of gold at sunrise, the fresh smell of the first snow, the different wildflowers and the months in which they bloomed. The rich man listened to every word. He had never thought about the wonders of nature in such a way. And then they reached the house. Thomas was invited to stay for the evening. The man gave him new clothes and a fine pair of boots. They were not as lovely as the golden fairy boots, but they were sturdy, well-crafted, and comfortable. That night, Thomas dined with the rich man and his family. He told them the story of his fairy boots. The next morning, they sent him on his way with food, a blanket, and a pack full of useful items. As Thomas walked away, he marveled at their generosity. Soft, hopeful, like a new beginning. An idea came to him. He turned it over in his head for the next few days. He arrived once more at the farm he had visited a year before. He knocked at the door. The father answered with his daughter peeking around his legs to look at Thomas. Instead of asking for anything they could spare, Thomas offered them a story. "I will give you an evening's worth of entertainment," he said, "in return for a meal." The father looked down at his wide-eyed daughter. She nodded, and he opened the door to allow Thomas inside. From then on, Thomas was welcomed in homes, inns, and anywhere people gathered in the evening. He told not just the story of the golden boots, but also new stories he collected during his journeys. Thomas never wanted for clothing, blankets, food, or boots again. He was welcomed with joy and excitement. A few years later, he was waving goodbye to a lovely little village that had housed him for the evening. A young man came jogging up to him. Shyly, at first, The young man asked if he might accompany Thomas on his walks. The young man said he also felt an urging in his heart to walk. He wanted to learn the stories of the people in this country, and also the secrets of the wilderness. He felt that all the passion and wonder of his life lay on the road. Thomas looked the young man up and down for a few moments. Finally, he nodded. "We are not far from a special place," he said. "Tonight we will camp on soft moss underneath a hawthorn tree." He smiled. "And then, maybe you will get your first story." Returning to the beginning, to the path that only appears to those willing to walk it. And now, you know about the wanderer and his golden boots. The boots that came from a fairy queen and disappeared because of a single careless word. The boots that taught him something about keeping promises and about the value of a good story. But here is the truth that matters most. Thomas did not need the boots to walk. He did not need magic to see the beauty in the world. The boots were a gift, yes, but the real gift was the journey itself. The hills, the rivers, the hawthorn tree, the kindness of strangers, the stories shared by firelight. These are the things that carried him. These are the things that never disappear. And they are still out there, waiting for you, waiting for anyone who is willing to walk, to listen, to pay attention to the small wonders that line every path. The barest breath. Tonight, as you lie here, warm and safe, think of Thomas. Think of the road that calls to each of us. Not necessarily a road of dirt and grass, but a road of the heart. The journey toward what truly matters. The boots may disappear. The magic may fade. But the walking never ends. Sleep well and dream of golden boots and of the stories you will tell when you finally find your way home. End of The Wanderer's Golden Boots, a Whispering Sands sleep story. Thanks for listening and liking our stories. Before moving towards second story, please subscribe, like, and hit that bell icon for more upcoming exciting fairy tales. There once was a gentleman, a kind and honest man, who lived with his young daughter in a comfortable house at the edge of a great forest. His wife had passed away when the girl was very small, and he had raised her alone, with love and patience through all the years. She was a gentle child, with her mother's kind eyes and her mother's warm heart, and she brought sunshine into every room she entered. But the gentleman grew lonely as the years passed, and at last he remarried. His new wife was a widow, a woman of proud bearing and sharp tongue, who had 2 daughters of her own. From the very first day, the stepmother made it clear that she did not care for her husband's daughter. The girl was too kind, too gentle, too good, and her very presence seemed to irritate the woman. She gave the girl all the hardest work to do: scrubbing floors, cleaning grates, dusting every room. Tonight's story is now gently coming to an end. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for listening. You don't need to do anything now. Just rest. Let your thoughts grow quiet, one by one, like candles being softly blown out. The soft sounds you hear, the gentle rain, the quiet hush of the world outside. They will continue to play, slowly, softly, steadily, guiding you deeper and deeper into comfortable, natural sleep. Close your eyes now. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands rest open. Let your breath grow slow and easy. There is nothing to carry with you tonight. No thoughts to hold, no worries to keep. Only this quiet moment, only this gentle stillness. Allow yourself to drift away now, like a leaf on still water, like a cloud across a silent moon. Deeper and deeper and deeper still. Good night and sweet dreams.